Tears of the Kingdom has been out for almost a year now, and whether you're just jumping back into the game or you never really left, I want to help make your next playthrough more exciting by providing you with some fun RPG or D&D style classes that you can use as inspiration. And then I'll take the classes through the Demon King's army and the boss rush to show you how they perform. Today we're talking about the Mage class, and for this one we decided to make 3 elemental variants: the Fire Mage, the Ice Mage, and the Shock Mage. You can also call them Pyromancer, Cryomancer, and Electromancer if you wish. Obviously, the most fitting armor for each of the mages is the corresponding elemental armor, so the Ember set for the Fire Mage, the Frostbite set for the Ice Mage, and the Charged set for the Shock Mage. All at level 2, which give the Fire and Ice Mages 18 armor, while the tankier Shock Mage has 24 armor. Since Shock as an element has less benefits than Fire and Ice, the Shock Mage also gets a little bit more survivability with 12 hearts and 1 2/5 wheels of stamina, while the Fire and Ice Mages have 10 hearts and 1 3/5 wheels of stamina. For weapons, they all have access to single-shot bows with Keese eyeballs fused to the arrows to act as a weaker magic missile that we have dubbed Magic Dart. They can only use the bow with a Keese eyeball fused to the arrow. The Fire Mage can only use one-handed weapons, the Ice Mage can only use two-handed weapons, and the Shock Mage can only use spears. None of them can use shields. Since magic rods deal really low damage, they also all have access to their elemental fuse materials like Choo-Choo Jellies and the Zolfos Horns that can be fused onto their weapons. But I would advise against throwing elemental gems, as that would make the game way too easy. So for a potential endgame build, I outfitted the Fire Mage with a Ruby Rod and a bunch of Flame Gleocorn one-handed weapons, the Ice Mage with a Sapphire Scepter and a bunch of Frost Gleocorn two-handed weapons, and the Shock Mage with a Topaz Staff and a bunch of Thunder Gleocorn spears. That was a lot, so pause here if you want to be able to read the details for each mage. By the way, if you want to help me decide how to build these classes, you should consider coming to one of my YouTube streams. All of these classes are built on stream with the help of my viewers. Now that we've gone over the builds, let's see how they perform against the Demon King's army and the boss rush and see where each mage variant shines. It will probably surprise no one to hear that the Ice Mage absolutely dominated the Demon King's army. Ice is by far the best gem for crowd control since it has a large AoE attack when fused to a weapon and it freezes enemies for a full 30 seconds. This combined with a two-handed spin attack made very quick work of the army, and it was safe too. The Fire Mage performed the worst with a Ruby Rod that did a poor job of controlling the crowd, only launching a few fireballs that would disable enemies for a few seconds while they were on fire. The only benefit here was the quick swing speed of one-handed fire weapons that allowed you to stop a single enemy mid-swing. Even though the Shock Mage didn't perform the best against the army, I had the most fun with this playstyle as you run around the arena kiting the enemies while taking occasional jabs to stun your pursuers, which was very safe due to the long reach of spears. It was also great when you shocked an enemy, causing them to throw their metal weapon, which would then hit one of their friends and shock them too. They all of course performed equally against Colgera, using their Magic Dart to easily take out the weak spots. For Marbled Goma, they were all pretty much equal, with a slight edge going to the Ice Mage just because the two-handed spin attack took Goma down faster. For Muck Darok, again, they were mostly equal, but this time the slight edge goes to the Shock Mage because the long range and quick attacks made it easy to get a lot of damage in right when Muck gets exposed. The Fire Mage performed best against Queen Gibdo because rubies have a much further range, allowing you to easily snipe the Queen out of the sky in Phase 2. The Ice Mage was the worst here. Even though the Sapphire's AoE was great against the small Gibdos, it has very low range, so it had a hard time reaching the Queen in midair. Shock was mid here because Topaz has long range like the Ruby but shoots much slower, so it's harder to land. For the Seized construct, the Fire Mage once again performed best here as the quicker swing speed allowed for the fastest combo to launch the construct into the walls. Ice Mage was also capable but slower, and the Shock Mage was the worst here because sometimes the end of the combo wouldn't launch him like it was supposed to. Phantom Ganon and Ganondorf were especially tough because they don't take any elemental damage, so the Fire Mage performed best against Phantom Ganon due to the one-handed spin attack being the easiest way to hit a lot of phantoms for big damage. And all the mages were equal against Ganondorf because they were all just relying on flurry rushes and physical damage. With all of that considered, let's take a look at the boss rush viability tier list. The Fire and Ice Mage both got B tier. Fire because it excels against bosses but struggles against crowds, and Ice because it excels against crowds but struggles against bosses. The Shock Mage sadly gets C tier because it doesn't really excel at anything here aside from being the most fun to play in my opinion. If we were factoring in the entire game and not just the boss rush, the Ice Mage would be A tier, the Shock Mage would be B tier, and the Fire Mage would be C tier, since most of the game consists of fighting normal enemies. And remember that this isn't a multiplayer game, so there's no need for perfectly balanced classes. Think of the Viability tier list as more of a difficulty indicator, letting you know that while the Shock Mage is a fun class to play, it's a bit harder to take through the boss rush than the Fire or Ice Mages. If you decide to give any of these classes a try, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, and if you don't like the way I've built these classes or you just want to be a part of the decision making process, then remember to check out my YouTube streams so you can help me build these classes like these lovely people did for the mages.